Welcome back to the Aussie Shed, ladies and gentlemen, for another episode of Project Fairlady. So today on Project Fairlady, I'm doing something a little bit out of left field. What I'm actually doing is I've started doing a bit of work on the intake manifold off the engine. And what I'm in the process of doing is cleaning up the intake manifold. By cleaning it up, I mean removing any unused lugs and bosses and things like that that aren't needed on the manifold. I'm also welding up all of the recesses that are there for the bolts that hold the coil packs in, all the channels that go down for clearance for those bolts beside the runners. You know, a lot of work like that. A lot of stuff's been done to clean this intake manifold up, plus a few little things that you're probably not expecting with it. Unfortunately, I didn't start filming this till I was already part way into it. So I'll just put an earlier picture up of the manifold and I'll do a bit of commentary on it, and then we'll just go into where I pick up on this, which is where I'm doing a bit of welding on it. And I've actually already done probably 4 or 5 passes with the welder and grinding to get to the point where I am. So I'll put up a picture and I'll fill you in on exactly what I'm doing. Alright, so all the coil mounts are going, all the recesses left from the coil mounts are going to go, all the excess bosses for things are all going to go, other mounts for all sorts of brackets, all that sort of stuff, that's all going to be going. All of the casting marks, extra thickness in the casting, all that stuff's going to be removed. The air valve mount on the back's going to go, and possibly some other things. I'm considering removing the balance tube and just putting a custom balance tube on the back, and also removing the whole back of the corner where the IACV mounts, and just addressing the poor shape of the manifold in that area. Alright, so we'll pick up where I've already started doing this. I've already cut and ground most of the mounts off, and I've started to weld over all of the recesses and all that sort of stuff. I've probably already done maybe 2 or 3 passes at this stage, but we'll pick up right now. So this is just a bit of a snippet of some of the welding that's gone into this upper inlet manifold. This is the 3rd pass that I've done. I've been up the sides, I've filled in the areas where the brackets were cut off and the bolts went through to hold the coils in, and now I'm cleaning up the top areas where I've sort of come up the side and then haven't wrapped over the top. So you can see where I'm kind of at with this. It is what it is. You can see it here. It's there's quite a bit of work in it. Quite a bit of work indeed. But as I say, this is really just one pass. So when I get this all ground up, I'm going to then go back down the sides, because there's unfinished areas on both sections, like either side. Like for example, this side here, you've only got that one side there because the coil pack sat in there. So I've got to go down both sides of that, both sides of this, a little section at the back there, and then the same thing over this side. So as you can see, all the excess brackets and bosses and things like that have all been cut off and welded up. Still a few to do. You can see there's a bit of a remnant of one just kind of there that I haven't gotten to yet. But it is quite a bit of work, guys, and for the most part the casting is pretty good. But there are some areas that is a pretty horrid, gnarly area just there. I won't touch it because it's red hot, but that just keeps blowing through. It just keeps blowing black shit. There is no hole behind it in the casting, but it's just pulling all this black shit out of the casting. So it's a little bit of a pain in the bum, but that's just sort of part and parcel. What I'll have to do is just keep grinding that out, weld it, grind it out, weld it, grind it out until it's no longer an issue. And I've had to do that in other areas on the inlet manifold as well. I'm pretty happy with how it's sort of turning out so far. I think it's going to look quite good when it's finished. I will be improving the shape of the factory casting a lot, just by flattening it off in a lot of areas. I'm doing this mostly by hand with files, hand files, and handheld grinders where I can use them. But as far as all the flattening goes, it's really just with files. There is probably a lot more that I'm going to do at this stage that could be on the list. I'm going to get rid of the crossover pipe here and put probably an AN12 crossover on the back, and quite possibly I'm going to cut this whole section of the manifold off and put a bend in it, similar to what's over this side, because I'm probably going to delete the IACV on the back, because I am intending to go to drive-by-wire with this, so therefore we won't need any of this valving at the back, and it'll just help clean the whole thing up a bit. And because I am using top feed injectors, GDR coils, there's no need for any of that vacuum piping and fuel piping and all that sort of stuff over the top, so it should end up with a pretty clean result, really. Not specifically what I'm going for, like I'm not trying for any kind of a show finish on this car. I just want everything cleaned up. Stuff that I don't need, I want it gone, and if that means cleaning up in the process to achieve that, well then that's what's going to happen. But like I say, early days with this yet, still a lot of cleanup to do, already a lot of work being done on it, but it is certainly coming along. You may say, well, why not just get another aftermarket inlet manifold for it, Trevor? Well, they're not that easy to come by, particularly here in Australia. If in the US it might be a different story, but in Australia we have to bring them in from the US. They are frightfully expensive, and for me personally, with my build, I don't think there's any real benefit to it. These factory stock manifolds are particularly good for low to mid-range torque. This is a street car, even though it will be putting out a reasonable amount of power. You know, I don't want to sacrifice any of that sort of low to mid torque, and for me overall it's the best option. Obviously I have the equipment to do this sort of stuff, so for me personally this kind of thing doesn't really cost that much. It's just kind of time and effort, and if I do it in my spare time and, you know, do it in bits and pieces, which is the way I have been going on this, then it's not that big sort of an ordeal. Anyway, we'll see how it turns out in the end, which you probably should be looking at pretty soon. So I'll see you when it's a little bit more finished. Alright guys, well that's mostly been cleaned up now, all that welding that we just did before. You can see the manifolds had a lot of smoothing work done on it. I've gotten rid of the casting finish right down, you know, into all these sort of little crevices and all that sort of stuff. A lot of flattening to try and give it more of a billet appearance, like flattening down all these surfaces and around the thing where the throttle bodies mount onto and everything. And it's turning out pretty good. I've done the bottom side as well, as you can see, rather than just kind of do the top and not worry about the underneath. A lot of work, lots of welding, lots of grinding. It's probably taken, oh god, 6 or 8, maybe more passes, welding and grinding and welding and grinding to get rid of all of the stuff that was there. Like there's all the clearance channels for the core pack bolts, the lugs, the mounting spots, and big recesses that have to be filled up. So yeah, overall a lot of work, guys, a lot of work. So I've decided to bite the bullet, and I'm going to cut this whole corner off the manifold. I will be going drive-by-wire throttle with this, so I don't need the IACV anymore on here, as I mentioned. And when you look down inside the manifold, and you can even feel it from inside here, this is just a big giant cluster of horrid recesses and corners with no real smooth transition into this last runner here. It's a pretty nasty thing really, compared to this side of the manifold, which is a fairly sweet transition into that, even though you do have this kind of weird funny looking runner on this side, which I don't know why that's for. It's got to be for clearance maybe with this engine in another chassis, but underneath it's pretty good. Like the runner looks strange on the top, but it looks like they've compensated for it with the underside to try and sort of even the flow characteristics back up. But yeah, as I say, this whole thing here is just a bit of a mess. So I don't feel I need to keep it there anymore, and I just want to simplify this manifold as much as I can. And again, I'm also going to cut out this whole section for the crossover pipe, the balance pipe on both sides. Get rid of that and weld it up. I've got some 6mm aluminium plate which I'm going to use to do all this fabrication work. This casting feels to me like it's around about that thickness. Feels like it's around about 6mm thick, so it'll match in nicely with it all, rather than use something that's a lot lighter than the main structure of the inlet manifold. But yeah, it's a lot of work. That's the way it is, isn't it, guys? You get a bit of a bee in your bonnet about something, and you just kind of can't help yourself. I'm that way anyway. And the main motivation of this, or part of the main motivation for this, is to make this upper plenum so that it's easily removable. By removing all this crap that's on there, to remove this manifold realistically, because I have top feed fuel rails, that's probably the only issue, but at a later date I might change over to the Polar Engineering under plenum ones, you know, which just means that's another thing that doesn't have to come off. But at the moment there are no fuel lines that go over the top, because the fuel lines all run in from the back. There are no electrical coil leads because the running R35 coils, all the wiring is underneath. This balance tube with all of the connections that run into that, I can get rid of all of those and just run them onto the side and run everything with AN fittings. That way, if it's AN stuff, even if it has to have a hose barb on it, when it comes time to remove this plenum, it's much simpler to just undo an AN fitting than it is to get hoses off hose barbs. And you know, if you've done that sort of stuff, it really sucks getting hoses on and off hose barbs. So if I can make as much of it AN as I can, and even if it's a rubber hose that has to go to a hose barb, I can use a push lock fitting for it. And then it's just a matter of disconnecting the drive-by-wire throttle, and just a few lines. You know, it should be pretty quick and easy to remove this, because with tuning of this engine as well, it would be really good to periodically through the tune pull the spark plugs out. And as you know, it's very hard to get the plugs out of these things once you change over to R35 coils. Aftermarket manifolds, I think the mill and machining upper plenum gives you access to all your coil packs and everything, but I don't have the money to afford something like that when I can, you know, get by with using this and just make modifications that make it a little bit easier for me. Because like I say, these manifolds do flow pretty well. I've seen engines pushing high numbers, even into 1,000 horsepower, that still run this factory manifold. Obviously it has its pluses and minuses. If you're going for all-out power in the high end of the rev range, you'd want something with a smaller runner and all that sort of thing. But it's horses for courses. It depends on what you're using the car for, what type of manifold you want. And for me, I'd still go to a long runner manifold anyway. I wouldn't go to a short thing like a Holly High Ram or anything like that, even if I could, you know. So anyway, guys, enough of me rambling on. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm about to get into this with a bandsaw or grinder, or however I decide to do this. And I'm going to cut that end right off. I'm going to cut these right out on both sides. So I'll give you a look at what it looks like when those bits are missing off it before we weld it up, and I might make the plates up and get it ready to weld and give you a bit of a look at it. Alright, I'll be back again when a little bit more is done. And just like magic, guys, there it is. So that's the end of the plenum section here. You can see it's a bit of a, you know, I don't know why they've made it like that, because there's no need for any of this. That's the only part that actually is of any use. You can see that connects up to this point here, which is part of your balance tube. That's where the IACV gets its air feed from. Looking through in there, you can see that that point there. That's all it is. So all of this sort of stuff in there, I guess they just did that, I don't know, for the casting. So that's now gone. So the next stage with this position here is to remove this whole section up here. That's, you know, again, inside there's all sorts of changes in height and all this kind of thing. To get back to a you know, a smooth wall, I really need to just cut straight through here. Then I'll go right down beside this section here, which is the beginning of the mount for the crossover pipe, and I'll come down beside this piece here, which is this section here. So I'll come down through there, straight down there till I hit the floor of this, and then I'll cut back across. So I'll take that whole piece out there. I'll then shape a curve into the bottom of this floor down here where I want it to go around, and form this sort of curve that feeds into this last runner here. So, bit of work. That's what it's all about, guys. Doing stuff and being a bit different and just having a crack at stuff yourself. So as I say, one on the other side, it's much simpler, of course. It's just a matter of cutting this whole, grinding this down and cutting out what's left and just welding a piece in and fixing that up, because this side is pretty good. This port or this threaded hole here, I might do something with that. I might either weld it up and get rid of it, or put an AN fitting on there. I will see. I'm only going to be able to get this thing so far actually, until I get this sort of dummy back up on the engine, probably in the final stages where I can see exactly what I need, how many vacuum ports I need, where I'm going to mount the brake booster and clutch booster lines and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, all those fine laying fittings and stuff I think will not be done until the very end. But at this stage, there's no reason why we can't take care of all this sort of stuff. So anyway, I'll get into that and see what happens. Just another quick bit of insight here, guys. I've cut this other section out in the top there now, and you can see what we were dealing with here fully on the inside. So that's the inside of that, the end of that left hand plenum there. You can see it's not really what you'd call turbulent free, so that's going to be all gone. So I'm just trying to determine what radius I need to use here. So I'm just using this dimension across here and then using that as my radius. So this is a piece that I've got in there, so with that sitting in there like sort of so, it just shows me, for me to get a nice smooth radius, I need to cut this back to about here, which is good because it'll allow me to actually get rid of that stud hole from the crossover pipe as well. So I'm going to cut that right back to there, so I can start the radius from the beginning where it touches on the inside there, just because, you know, not that it's realistically probably going to be any benefit or make any difference, but I'm doing it once, I might as well just do it, you know, how it's kind of meant to be done. As long as we don't restrict this distance down here, across here, sorry, any more than the port size across here, which we aren't. We're actually still wider than the port size when we transition around this bend. So everything's good. So yeah, I'll be, like I say, cut that back, mark around here, probably cut back up into this runner and across through the top there, and then start to sort of rebuild it. Haven't done anything on that side yet. Obviously I'm sort of working on this side at the moment, but that's how it's going. So I just finished the fabrication work on this little piece here that we're putting in that corner. You can see how this ended up shaping out and the shape that I've cut into that to make it all work. So that's my piece there. You can see it's some 6mm aluminium flat plate that I have shaped so that it fits all of the contours that I need for this piece. You'll notice that it is all V'd out so that we get good penetration. It's basically a seamless repair, because this will all be getting ground down back flush when it's finished. So obviously we don't want a weld sitting on top that we're going to grind off. We want the weld to be still in position, and we want full penetration. This piece is just kind of tacked on. It's still going to be daggy through there. I'll probably regrind that before I weld it again, but I've also welded along the inside there, just so that if I have to round this corner off, there's still a bit of meat on the weld on the inside, you know, to kind of be able to do this shaping to get it matched perfectly without thinning out on the corner. But it's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with how that has turned out. So I'm just getting ready to weld it up. I haven't done much with the balance tube connection point repair yet. I have cleaned it up and got it ready to kind of cut a piece into, but I'll probably just do that off camera, weld this, and clean it all up and give you a look at it next when it's finished. Maybe I might just show a bit of welding. That'll probably be about it before it's finished. Alright, I'll get into this. So for this stage, guys, that's pretty much done. So that's where we did that piece there on the corner. You can see that turned out pretty good. You know, Doesn't even really look like anything's happened there. All looking pretty good. That's where our balance tube was on that side. That was actually a real pain in the bum, honestly. Where the one of the studs were, where the balance tube was here, when I started welding the piece in, basically the stud hole on this side here wasn't all the way through. So what I'd done is I'd run a drill through it to clean all the old aluminium and stuff through there. Still left the bottom in it though, because there was still a little bit of meat left in the base. But I did drill out to all nice new clean aluminium. Took all the thread out, chamfered it right back so it was on 45 degrees all the way around the hole, like opened it right up. And I noticed that when I started welding around the piece, around the main piece, that the hole actually filled up with oil. And you can still see it in the inside where it was actually running down through the edges of the, before I welded it there, down on the inside. And I'm just like, where did all that come from? So it was bleeding back out of the aluminium casting. So obviously where the thread was into the casting, it had been sucking oil in through that stud thread for many years, and the casting is quite saturated with oil in this area. So I had a devil of a time sorting this particular spot out. I ended up having to weld and grind and weld and grind this, and it just sort of kept moving around. It started off sort of here, but it ended up sort of coming down and then started chasing back along this way. Obviously that's where probably the main area of the oil sort of pocket in the casting was, and I was just chasing it. At some points I'd go, oh yeah, that's almost right there now, there's only a little bit of porosity there, and I'd go, I'll just grind that little bit out there and finish that last bit off, and I'd grind it. I'd go to weld it, then it'd just open up another big blowhole and it'd just blow a whole heap of stuff out and make just an absolute mess. Then I'd have to grind up a really big section and then try and weld that, and that might open up more. I ended up just with this huge thing that I was just chasing constantly. It took me a lot of work to get that right and get rid of all the sort of porosity and everything that was there, so that I'm sort of happy with how it's sealed up. But mate, it almost had me. I tell you, I was getting really concerned whether or not I was actually going to be able to fix it, because it was quite a thing at one stage. But it's all good now. You can see there's not really any sign that there was ever really a problem there. But yeah, man, that just about had me. I think it should be pretty well fit for purpose for what I want it for. Obviously it still needs a lot of work. This surface finish needs to be improved a bit on it. There's still lots of scratches and unevenness in it that's going to be cleaned up. This isn't going to be polished or anything, by the way. It's just going to have like a flat silver aluminium looking coating on it. So it doesn't have to be perfect anyway, because it's not like it's going to be sort of a glossy finish. Things still to do on it. I'm not sure whether these lugs, I've left these lugs on both sides at this point, because I may use them to attach wiring harnesses and things to. I'm not sure, but if not, they're fairly simple to just cut those off. I haven't obviously done any of the AN stuff on it at this stage, because I'm really not 100% sure where it's going to go. The AN12 balance tube isn't done yet. I don't have any AN12 weld-on pieces, so I haven't been able to do those, and I might as well just do the whole lot together. So at this stage, I think that's about all I can do with that, and I'm pretty happy with it. I think it looks pretty good. I think it's a huge improvement on the way the manifold looked from the factory. And just another bit of a look at what we actually cut off the end of the manifold. That bloody horrid thing over there, which is now just this nice smooth rounded corner here. But yeah, I still don't really understand. Obviously, I do understand. It's obviously because that was the easiest, cheapest way to do the casting. It gave them this mounting position where they wanted it for the IACV. And, you know, it's just one of those things. There are many compromises done during, you know, mass manufacturing of components like this. Not all of them really work that well in favour of, you know, performance of the vehicle and all that kind of thing. But manufacturing cost is probably one of the main things that that they're looking at with something like this. Yeah, anyway. But yes, much better alternative. Much better alternative. So that's it for the video, guys. Dragged on a little bit. It certainly turned out to be a lot more work than I had intended on putting into this. But a lot of these things, that's just how they sort of go. You know, they evolve as you start making them. Still to do with this, I am putting billet throttle bodies on it. And as I say, drive-by-wire will be going onto it as well. So, you know, when it's finished, the whole kind of manifold throttle body setup should be pretty decent on the car. Certainly a lot better than it was from the factory. Alright guys, if you've stuck it out this long, bloody good on you. I appreciate you watching my videos. As always guys, thanks for stopping by the Aussie Shed. It is always bloody great to have you guys here and partaking in this symbiotic relationship that we have where I make stuff, you watch my videos, and I give you a bit of entertainment, and maybe you might find something useful in them. But as always, I'll bloody well see you on the next one. Cheers.